So Makoto May is coming to a close. There's really only about a week left. With that time, I want to go through some of the more rare and interesting figures. Not as if to say that any of these weren't interesting, but this one is the rarest figure of Makoto out there. Today we'll be looking at the Wave Corporation and Dreamtech Makoto Niijima 1/8 scale figure from Persona 5 the animation. I consider myself a bit lucky in one way that there has been quite a decent amount of Makoto figures when I really look back. This one was one of the very first, and I've only had one other figure from Wave Corporation and Dreamtech similarly. I did like that figure, but that's much more new than this. This is older, and it's actually pretty much impossible to find. I say that now, but of course the week that I found this, I saw two other ones pop up, one on MFC and one on eBay, so go figure. Still, I did have my friend import this one for me, and it was a little bit of a higher price than I'd like to admit. But I was willing to do anything to get this super rare figure. This thing originally only retailed for like $90, which is crazy to think. And this of course is a figure of Makoto in her school uniform. I do rather like Makoto in the Shujin Academy uniform, so let's figure out if this figure can pull off this uniform as flawlessly as Miss Niijima does. And with the box out of the way, like most scales, Makoto comes in one blister. So then first we have a base, which is actually pretty nice looking. It is just a black disc, but there is a sort of velvety felt on top of it. Maybe it actually is a maroon velvet, I'm not sure. It's very soft and very deep red, which is appropriate for Persona. There's a single metal peg sticking out, which I'm assuming is going to plug into her foot. And the rim of the base is a gloss black. The bottom's plain. While I do like this more than a simple black disc, there is one issue with something with this sort of finish. You could scratch this very easily. It might sound weird, but this will show a sort of whitish mark if you're a little too rough with it, or if just too sharp of a piece will collide with the base. So if you do have this figure, or you're going to get it, or you have a base like this, be careful. But in her plastic sarcophagus, we have Miss Niijima herself. Now you have to be careful with something like this because this was manufactured quite a while ago, and it is old. Though with that said, I will say that overall this is a pretty solid figure. I really like some of the choices that were made here. Finishing on the stockings is a sort of matte black, which is really interesting and it does really draw your eyes. In person, I will say that there is a contrast between the skirt and the stockings, and then of course her actual vest here, which all really works in a great way to continue guiding your eye. She's even got some shiny boots, which I don't remember if that's actually part of her outfit. The sculpt here is really nice. I want to say that the body looks really attractive. It's got that thin feminine form that Makoto should be known for. A slender neck, some sharp shoulders, as well as that defined collarbone, all really invite the eye to look at the very center of the figure, which then leads you to her face. There's a lot going on here. I think that there's a decent amount of good sculpt on this figure for its age. I will say that some of the paintwork is a bit flat, especially in something like her hair, but overall, I think that this is a really nice figure. It feels good in hand too. It doesn't feel super light like you might imagine it would because this is, again, a very skinny figure. But before I rant too much, let me put her on the base and we'll go over her from head to toe. There's only really one way to do it. You go ahead and plug that dominant flat foot right in. And once she's fully planted, her other foot, which is angled upward, really does touch the base, which I think is a great attention to detail there. A lot of times companies would make that just sort of float. Some people might not really like this because it's very plain. The Shujin Academy uniform is just that, it's a school uniform. But there's plenty of other figures of Makoto in her Metaverse Queen outfit from the Phantom Thieves. And there's even the alternate one of her in the dancing uniform. So this is welcomed because, again, I like her in this. I said in the Nendoroid video I would love to see her in the Shujin Academy uniform, and here we are with one right here in front of us. And this figure is approximately 9.5 inches or 24 centimeters tall. For the time, I think that there's a lot to like here. That base actually is very attractive to look at. It adds a sense of regalness, or maybe even royalty, if I might say so. And again, the box does advertise that this figure has a special feature that most scales don't have. She actually has a ball joint in her neck, which will allow her head to move side to side and up and down even just so slightly. So you can actually have her looking at you from different angles, which is definitely very interesting. I don't know how well that would hold up over time, but I do appreciate that ability. I say this because I think over time that ball joint could weaken, and then her head could just kind of get stuck in positions or just always cock to one side because there's not enough plastic to keep it steadily standing in the neutral position. But I think that would take quite a bit of fiddling around with her. So then, despite me calling it a head to toe, let's make it a toe to head and start down at her feet. I think these boots look really good. The finishing on them is smooth and shiny, which makes me imagine that they might be some sort of leathery material. I think this works really well, especially because, like I said, there are contrasting values of different finish. All the details in this look really good. There's lots of etched in little lines that I'm assuming are going to be the different seams and flaps that are in the boot, which I'm sure we're all familiar with. We all have a pair of shoes at home. There's a pair of zippers in the front, and everything is panel lined and painted rather well. What's up with Makoto having nice boots? Then to her legs. Simple black tights somehow are driving me wild with this figure. Those legs are so nice. The matted finish really is something to talk about here. It's smooth, but it's very elegant. In the front and back, you can trace those legs right up. And of course, with the way that her legs are shaped, light will bounce off the nearest point to the light source itself, giving a wonderful highlight to these. And as simple as it is, having her one foot on its tiptoe allows for a sort of dynamic pose here with the legs, which is far more interesting than if she just had the other leg flat. If we trace that up, it leads us to her skirt, which, again, looks really good. It's sculpted in a really nice way that has the ruffle, of course, coming outward towards her leg that is further towards the viewer. It all makes sense, and the Shujin Academy gridded sort of plaid looks really nicely printed on. There's even a pair of golden snaps in the very front, and they're really small, but they're decently painted. They're a little outside of the lines, but you've got to give them credit for something so small. Though I will say in the back, there was a single paint error on the side of her skirt. But I noticed that error because, my goodness, the back end of her is very full. And I don't know if that's meant to just be a killer booty or if the skirt is sort of billowed out, but damn, girl. And if you're a real pervert, yes, you can look under her skirt, and there is just the slightest amount of sculpting that would imply that she has a pair of panties on. There's creasing in towards the crotch where her thighs meet her pelvis. And this is sculpting that you're really never meant to see, but they went and did it anyway, so kudos to you for that. Moving on, she has a pair of very delicate feminine hands, and I've got to say, these look really good. I wouldn't say that I'm a hand guy. I don't know what that means, but either way, this is something that I'm noticing really nicely because she has these wonderfully shaped slender fingers, and at the tips of each one, she has the slightest bit of pink nail polish on her nails. There's a little bit of gumminess in some of the sculpt, and there's actually a single paint error on one of her knuckles, but this is such a small spot that I really don't think that it deserves a point deducted. Now going up her slender arms, we have that Shujin Academy undershirt, I guess? It's a high-collared sort of turtleneck style white shirt that is very tightly clung to her body. That being said, there's a decent amount of shading in it, as well as some wrinkling at the points where it would be bent. It all makes sense and it looks good. Her vest is actually one of the more impressively painted things on her. While it is a very deep brown, almost to the point where it looks sort of charcoal-y, there is a brown wash that's been put over this to allow for the subtlest amount of shading that would imply that this isn't just a single faded black. This is a simple technique, but used so effectively here, because with the sculpt of the vest, there are little wrinkles and of course the lines that would show the seams in the fabric that all catch this wash really well. It allows for a great dynamic highlight bouncing off of the different areas of her body. And again, we have some more gold snaps going up the middle. But again, there's another small paint scratch on the side of her chest. It's a shame because this is a pretty noticeable one right out in front, and this is a brand new figure. They listed it as used, but it was new. There's a pair of gold fasteners that are holding on the straps that wrap around her neck, but that brings us to her collar. I think a woman's collar is a very attractive area, and here they got this perfect, because in her portrait, you can see her collarbones, and they got them right on this figure. I gotta give points for that. That's great accuracy. She has some sharp shoulders too, and I've gotta say, along with the rest of her slender frame, it makes sense and it all looks very nice and incredibly feminine. But now on to the most important area, her face. This is the one place where I think they kind of messed up. Her mouth is just a bit wrong. There's two little areas that are sort of dug in on either side of her mouth. And I get what's going on here, but unfortunately they catch shadow in a way that make her look like she's making a weird puffy mouth face. See if you see it too. I'm pretty sure that there's no shading in her face. There might be something right here at the bridge of her nose. Her lips are pink, but not overly so. The eyes look really good actually. At certain angles this looks really nice, but I think dead on, the lips really ruin it. Still, they got her eye color right, which is very important, and there's something very clean about the way that these are printed on. Then to her hair. I want to say the hair is probably the weakest part. There is a tiny amount of shading and some highlights at the very top of her head. She of course has her hair braid, which is sculpted okay, but ultimately it's kind of a boring hair sculpt. I think this could have done with a little bit more subtle and desaturated color to make this pop a bit better. Or maybe the problem is that it's popping too much, because the brown that they used on the top and the back is just a little too saturated. I get that they didn't want to mute it too much and make it super dark, but unfortunately these colors come together in sort of a muddy mixture. The hair sculpt is decent enough. It's pointed in a bunch of spikes in the back, and there's even a second ruffle, and then of course the area where her hair is connecting to her head, which all looks pretty good. And despite the fact that her neck is movable, there's really not too much of a gap that you're ever going to notice. From a distance, I'll say this figure looks really darn good, almost perfect, to the point where you're really only going to start deducting points when you get in there with a magnifying glass. But as I say in a lot of my reviews, these weren't meant to be looked at under a magnifying glass. You're meant to just sort of look at these on a shelf or on your desk or something. So for that, I'll say Makoto looks wonderful. In summary, I'm going to say that there's really not much that I dislike about this figure. I think for the time, this was done really well. I actually expected far less from it because in the production photos, I think it actually looks worse. In person, this doesn't look bad at all. One of the best things about this has gotta be the sculpt. Secondary, I think color is really well done too. And the differing texture values is another thing that I'm loving about this. I think they used limitations really well here. And that's what's most impressive. Again, this is a simple schoolgirl in a school uniform, so there's not much you can do to really dress that up. With a limited and somewhat drab color palette, they were able to use differing textures and finishes, as well as wonderful sculpting to really show off her anatomy to make this thing very unique. But the more that I tried to articulate the great features of this figure, the more I was falling in love with it myself. And let's not forget, we got a nice base and even some articulation in the neck here. So I think I'm going to be really fair about this in saying that the Dreamtech Wave Corporation Makoto Niijima is going to get a 9 out of 10 from me. I sat and thought about this for some time. There's some great features here, and I think that Dreamtech and Wave Corporation are a good company for scale figures. They definitely took some risks here, and I think they paid off. Even with this figure being so far from the past, I'll say that they were releasing wonderful figures all the way back then. So I gotta be honest, these guys are on my radar. But what do you guys think? Was I too nice? Do you think that I gave this too high of a score because it's Makoto? I swear, if you saw this in person, you'd see what I mean. If you like this video, make sure to like it, and comment and tell me what you thought about this figure. Do you have any figures from Dreamtech and Wave Corporation? Let me know. And of course, it is Makoto Mei still. So with that said, make sure to check out another video in the playlist and get ready because I'm saving the best for last. Despite Makoto being a student, she sure did teach us a lesson today. So thank you, Sensei. So until the next class, thank you so much for watching, have an amazing day, and keep on collecting.